Hey everyone, Jason Sherman here. In today's episode of Zero to CEO, I have with me Executive Coach Darius Ross. Welcome to the show.
Pleasure. I appreciate it.
And today we're going to talk about leadership and building an entrepreneurial culture. Great topic. And one of the things I always tell people is you're either a follower or a leader. What do you think is really the biggest piece of advice you can give somebody who might be a follower and they want to be a leader?
I want to see how to word it without being too intense.
Sure.
Understand that you can't step on feelings and emotions and not expect feedback. You're going to have to be hardcore. I mean, it's part of my whole process in the speaking engagement. It's called the hardcore tour. And I talk about sometimes you just have to make people uncomfortable. Yeah. And they're not going to like where you are, but you have to be where you are. If you've been a general before, then now you can be a soldier. If you've been a soldier before, it's easy to be a general. And what it comes down to is appreciating privilege. Once you have privilege, you can appreciate poverty, and it's vice versa.
Yeah, and a lot of people, they say you got to make hard decisions when you're a leader, right? Like that's just how it works. And they say it's nothing personal, it's just business. So these are the kind of sayings that always pop up, and it's true. When it comes to the entrepreneurial culture now, which is a bit different from the corporate world, what does it really mean to be a leader in that entrepreneurial culture?
Losses. One word. Can you take losses? Will you accept losses? Will you accept accountability? And will you accept, can I use a word of questionable word? Can you accept? Very simple. Very simple.
Got it. And in terms of leaders like not fostering an entrepreneurial mindset, I mean, we can kind of translate it over to the corporate world. What would you give in terms of advice to do that? But what are the consequences of not doing it?
If you don't, you lose your business, you risk your family, you risk everything else. And like I call it all hands on deck. Everybody has to understand that when you make a decision, we have to live with it. From the baby that has to take less milk formula to maybe grandpa that has to come in the business at nighttime to the kids that have to come after school. Everybody has to understand that the decisions, the ends justify the means, basically. Can you do that?
One of the things I noticed in the corporate world were when, this is years ago when I was in IT corporate, where the management that I had on, that was over me, that did encourage us to think more like entrepreneurs. I always think that's a smart way to do it, because if not, you just feel like a number, like a paycheck, and no one really cares about what you think. How do you think leaders can encourage their employees to think more like entrepreneurs?
Be open enough to actually listen. That's the first thing. Can you actually listen and hear that there's an alternative idea? I mean, I think the best thing that I found out is not to be the smartest person in the room. New ideas, innovative ideas that you think are crazy. Sometimes I'll look at somebody looking at me and they'll say something and I'll be like, okay, let's just try this. And I'm not quite sure where this is going to go. Let's just try this. I mean, a good example was I had some storage containers that were on unlevel ground and we were putting them out for a construction project. And the gal said, okay, let's put them on the ground this spot. And the guy that I was using told him to another spot and they started sinking. I'm like, well, what the hell? Let's try her way. They're still sitting there 5 years later, so it works. So it's being able to look at unconventional thought.
I like that. So, I mean, one of the things I always tell my employees is, no idea is a bad idea, right? If you have creativity, if you have ideation, and you're willing to, like you said, listen to them, you might get some really great ideas out of this. Now, when that happens, when you have your employees give you ideas, how do you then foster that and grow the idea and then support the employees further from there? Because that's kind of the harder part.
Be willing to incubate it, because I'll give you a good example of what happened. When we look at Sears and Amazon, all Amazon is a speeded up Sears. Sears could have taken over Amazon had they been smart and looked at the fact that, okay, here's Jeff Bezos. He's nipping at my heels. I'm going to buy him out and take him out of business. Same thing with IBM and Microsoft. Bill Gates bought Microsoft's technology from IBM. They threw it away. So you got to be willing to incubate the idea of somebody that comes so far off the base, kind of go, let me just think about this and put the money behind it. Have a research budget that's a throwaway budget. What do you have to lose? Just be experimenting.
That's you brought up the example of Bill Gates and Microsoft and IBM. It's just such a great story that I always tell people about how, Steve Jobs and Bill Gates both saw Xerox's interface, their graphical interface, their mouse, and they weren't doing anything with it, right? So then, people say that Steve Jobs and Bill Gates stole the modern GUI, graphic user interface from Xerox. They didn't steal anything. They weren't using it for anything. So when you have an idea, when you have employees with ideas, like you said, you have to then make it work. You have to grow it. You have to maybe test it out in the market. What do you do when you're a leader and you have these employees and you have the entrepreneurial mindset and they don't know exactly how to test their theories in the market because they're not entrepreneurs. They're employees that go by the handbook. So then what are some of the ways that these leaders can take an initiative to help their employees then test the waters and test the market?
Be willing to go before your board of directors, be willing to go before your senior management and say, listen, I have a group that I think has ideas, and be willing to go before them and say, listen, can we turn around and put some money? Can we do a venture capital fund? Can we do some sort of fund that will allow for innovative ideas to be processed? I mean, let's create a group within the company to do this. And then say to yourself, I'm willing to turn around and invest my time off hours or even sometimes off pay to get this done. You never know. All of a sudden you have an idea that takes the company another division and now the company is exuding profit. So it's win-win all the way around.
Makes a lot of sense. And one of the things I noticed when I was reading about you was that you like to optimize with the military guerrilla mentality. Tell me a little bit about that and how you can profit from it professionally.
One of the things of it is I call it hardcore badass. Are you able to turn around and realize at some point in time, you cannot look the other way? You got to be able to go into battle and say to yourself, no matter what, this has to work. You have no other options. There is no such thing as turning away. So I use the example of when I say to folks in coaching, okay, listen, I'm going to give you an example. We're facing 1 million soldiers and we only have a container of weapons and we have 6 of us. Now there are 2 options there. We know we're going to die or we're going to fight to live. Those are 2 options. So you take the option of you're going to surrender. You know what's going to happen. You're going to be captured. It might be, maybe not, you might live. But if you fight, you might be surprised. You might be able to turn the situation around in your favor because they don't know what they don't see. So it's like, what's in your brain? Do you have the capacity to win at all costs? Sometimes the winning at all costs, the other guy doesn't know that you're scared. So it's very simple. Can you turn around and turn it around?
And what are some of the pieces of advice you would give someone to do that, to turn it around, to go forward, to fight through? Like what are the things that an entrepreneur needs to know or a leader needs to know to do that?
Accept fear, acknowledge the fact that you don't know, and be comfortable enough to accept the fact of what you need to do next. Be open enough to realize that there is something else that's missing. And at the end of the day, you don't know the answers, right? There's an unknown. Accept the unknown, look at the fear and acknowledge it and accept it. I'm afraid, acknowledge and accept it. It's like I call it hunting in the woods. A good example that I say to coaching clients is, okay, cut the lights off and just listen for sound. You'd be surprised at things that you understand in the dark. True. So accept the fact that you're in the dark. Accept the fact you're walking, you can't see anything. Now, can you guide a path?
You brought up fear. This is like a huge thing in the world of entrepreneurship. Not so much in the corporate world, but in the entrepreneurial world. I mean, people are afraid to commit 4 or 5 years of their life to an idea that they may spend a lot of money on, a lot of time on. They're not sure if it's going to work. There's also fear of missing out. Like, if I don't start this company and other people are doing things like this, then I'm missing out on the rewards that can come out of this. And then there's the fears of failure, right? What if I do this, I build this company, I get all these employees, and then it just crashes and burns and I wasted all my time. How can people break through this?
I'll give you a simple example. We get married, right? We date, right? It works out, it don't work out. Guess what? We spend 5 or 6 years hoping that this person is going to be okay, hoping that everything's going to work out. We go through 10 years of a marriage. We fuss, we fight, we feud. It may or may not work out. Same thing. It's a question of whether or not you're going to be committed to the idea, whether you're committed to your goals, whether you're committed to your success. And sometimes it don't work out. So you got to go into it saying to yourself, all right, what the hell? It don't work out. I gave it the best shot. But you give it your best shot.
You give it your best shot. Although I would argue that, in this particular case, the divorce rate's like 50%, but with entrepreneurs and businesses, it's probably a lot higher failure rate. But it's a really good analogy. You're committing to something, you're hoping that it works out, but you can't really control the whole situation. So let's talk about that. I always tell people, focus on the things that you can control, and the ones that you can't let them stress you out. So maybe using that military mindset that you talked about, how can you navigate this part of it, of like controlling what you can and what you can't?
I deal in arbitrage when it comes to the dynamics of that. And what that basically means is when you're hedging your bets forward or back, which is like a foot or option, or a put an option when you're doing in business. And sometimes you got to go forward, you got to go backwards, and you got to look at all the dynamics of liabilities. It is a guarantee that you're going to fail. That's a guarantee. Okay, now what are you going to do to succeed? You've already laid out the possibilities of what can go wrong. Now, what are you going to do? Are you going to analyze the target market? Are you going to analyze your customers? Are you going to figure out your employees? Are you going to figure out what's going on with the sales? Is the product right? Once you know all the things that can go wrong, now all you got to do is focus on what can go right. But you've got to establish the fact that it can go wrong.
Yeah.
And look at all the liabilities ahead of time and just analyze that. Okay, I know it can go wrong. Okay, what you going to do to get it right?
So how can you mitigate the risk that's involved with what could potentially happen? And speaking of risk, I mean, that's another part of this, right? I mean, there are a lot of people out there who are afraid to take risks because of the repercussions. If you're a leader, you have to, first of all, you're a risk taker. That's number one. Like, you are a risk taker. Now, how do you empower the rest of your team? Because I've found this to be difficult. How do you empower the rest of your team to be more inclined to take risks?
I use that example behind me there of the rhino and the rhino that's rocking the microphone. There's a reason why he's got the boxing gloves on. Because every time I'm going out there to speak, I'm boxing. I'm boxing to keep somebody awake. I'm boxing to keep somebody alive and well and getting my message and so forth. And I'm the rhino. I'm going in the China shop and breaking things up. So the bottom line of it is you got to be prepared to make your team realize you're one crazy ass person. And you have one goal and one goal only: to bring this product to market, to make the team effective, and to be a drill instructor. You cannot fail. We know failure is a guarantee, but you cannot fail. There's no options. We don't have a paycheck. We got to make this thing work. That's our paycheck. That's our reward.
I like that. And one of the things that I always like to hear from executive coaches like yourself, I don't talk to many. I usually talk to entrepreneurs or CEOs of companies, but you're someone who coaches those people. So how do you help them navigate adversity and develop a strong mindset to aim for a successful outcome?
I give them the example of the inner city kids that are dealing with inner city violence. And I say, okay, this kid has to survive from day one being faced with adversity. At any given moment, he is facing the challenge of death. So if you're in a situation, you're in an environment that you're not facing that, think about that person that every single day has to walk down the street with a drive-by shooting, with the possibility of everything that's going wrong. This is the inner city life. Now put yourself in that person's position in your business. Any given day, it can go wrong. Any given day, it can fail. Any given day, your competitor can turn around, call you up and say, listen, I want to sell. So the bottom line of it is putting yourself and your team in the position of the inner city person. What happens when you're thinking about that all the time? I mean, it's almost like PTSD. So if you're in a business, you don't need to have PTSD. These kids are dealing with it every single day when you listen to their story. You hear some of the violence that goes on. You have to put yourself in that same mindset. I can't live in that environment of lack of success, because the bottom line of it is there are people that are living with that every day. And in the business, you don't have to live with that. You're living with the fact, okay, the customer's going to come to the door. Do I have the product that they need? Do I have what they want and desire? And how do I make it marketable?
Amazing. Put yourself in someone else's shoes. Think about someone else's mindset and really kind of zoom out and look at the bigger picture. I love it, Darius. Where can people find out more about you and maybe work with you?
They can contact me at dariusaross.com, or they can also reach me at DRSPKTOYOU. It's Dr. Speak to You at yahoo.com. They can reach me on both ends and just put in the messaging coaching.
Good stuff. All right, guys, check out DariusAross.com. Hope you learned something, and we'll see you in the next episode.